This must be where pies go when they die. Hey, Night Riders! Disregarding Henry here with another episode of Unmade Masterpieces. And special thanks to Kurt Denter for suggesting this one. In heaven, everything is fine. David Lynch. That name, without question, has become synonymous with weirdness, dreamlike surrealism, and an uneasy feeling of something terrible happening just beneath the surface. He's an artist with such a distinctive style, such a unique sensibility, that we had to invent a new adjective just to describe it: Lynchian. Lynch first exploded onto the film scene with his 1977 debut Eraserhead, a hypnotic and disturbing allegory for fatherhood which ran for years on the midnight movie circuit. Its many fans included comedian Mel Brooks, who personally hired Lynch to direct The Elephant Man, his first major studio film in 1980, which brought along with it his first Oscar nomination for Best Director. After a brief flirtation with big-budget filmmaking, Lynch returned to a smaller, more personal style with Blue Velvet, and achieved both the critical and commercial success that allowed him the artistic freedom he needed to flourish. He would go on to create the cult classic television series Twin Peaks with Mark Frost, win the Palme d'Or with Wild at Heart in 1990, make an unexpected but welcome venture into family filmmaking with the Disney-produced The Straight Story in 1999, before reaching another career high in 2001 with the enigmatic and seductive Mulholland Drive. Since then, things have been eerily quiet in Lynchville. He released the 3-hour digital experiment Inland Empire in 2006, and that remained his only other major work this century, until the announcement of the Twin Peaks revival in 2014. As legendary as his surprisingly short filmography may be, Lynch's unfinished works may be just as famous. His most ambitious and longest gestating is undoubtedly the science fiction-themed odyssey, Ronnie Rocket. Lynch planned to produce this film at various points in his career, and the script went through several different drafts, 2 of which are publicly available and can easily be found with a quick Google search. The first draft, with a slightly altered spelling on the title, was likely written around the time of Eraserhead in the late 70s, and the second draft, with the updated title, was possibly revised around the time of Blue Velvet in the late 80s. Both drafts are very similar in most of their details, but also deviate in several key areas, most notably in the third act. I'll be summarizing both of these drafts, the first or earliest draft here, the later draft in part 2, and in part 3 I'll cover the whole production history of the project, and Lynch's many attempts at bringing it to fruition. Ronnie Rocket features a number of Lynchian themes and obsessions: industry, physical deformity, dreams, nightmares, innocence, corruption, true love, film noir. This script has all of that and more. We're also going to be frequently jumping back and forth between 2 different narratives. I'll do my best to clarify when the story switches over, and hopefully this summary won't get too confusing. But it's David Lynch, so it will be confusing. The script opens with this cryptic description: "There is a dark land where mysteries and confusions abound, where fear and terror fly together in troubled cities of absurdities." With this, we are introduced to the city. It is described as a dark and desolate place of perpetual night, with smokestacks billowing black soot that engulfs the sky. The architecture is a stark, gargantuan 30s style. Countless electrical wires snake through every open area between the buildings. Very few signs of life are evident. Eventually, we find ourselves in a hospital. Deep within its bowels is a man whom we will only know as the detective. He's dressed like a 40s-era private eye, with a pistol in a shoulder holster. He stands in a room across from a horrifically disfigured man in a bed. The man, named Ronald Desartes, is described as having only a vaguely human shape. He is unable to move or speak, and can only communicate with high-pitched screams. Ronald indicates to the detective that he needs to write something. When he is given a pencil and paper, he draws a strange series of symbols, which he gives to the detective. Apparently having received what he came for, the detective leaves the hospital and boards a train, attempting to travel deeper into the labyrinthine city, but is soon told by the conductor that certain areas have been closed, and the inner city itself is completely inaccessible. He rides to the last deserted stop before being forced off. Back at the hospital, Ronald is kidnapped by two bumbling surgeons, Dr. Dan Pink and Dr. Bob Platinum, who take him to their laboratory and begin conducting experiments on him. Their research is being funded by a wealthy and eccentric woman named Deborah, who lives in the apartment above their lab, and with whom they both share a rather odd romantic relationship. Deborah believes wholeheartedly that Dan and Bob are surgical geniuses, though that appears to be far from the truth. Evidently, their plan is to completely rebuild Ronald's face and body. Meanwhile, the detective attempts to make his way around in the deep city. He meets a man with a sore on his leg named Terry, and reveals that he is looking for someone named Mr. Fry, with the intent of trying to leave the city, which has been closed off by a man named Hank Bartels, also known as Mr. Magic. Without any leads, the detective checks into a hotel to rest for the night, and from his room in the adjacent building across the street, he sees a smiling woman who only sits and stares and smiles at him. Into the hotel lobby comes Terry, along with another man, Bill, Mr. Fry's brother. They head upstairs, grab the detective, and begin leaving the hotel with him. At this point, a strange kind of metamorphosis takes place. There is another man in the lobby, hidden in the shadows. When Bill and Terry leave with the detective, he begins convulsing and making strange sounds, and when he steps out of the shadow, he has become the detective. Simultaneously, Bill and Terry discover that they are no longer carrying the detective with them, and instead, it's a hollow body with no face. The detective, very confused by this turn of events, checks into another room and lays down to sleep. At the doctor's laboratory, the real work begins on Ronald. They begin surgically implanting various electrical devices inside his body, then use electricity in unusual ways to alter his physical features. Their work is far from perfect, but despite their mistakes and constant bickering and fighting, Ronald soon has a completely new face and body. He's fitted with a red pompadour wig, and as the doctors prepare to activate his new body, their building suffers a power surge which unexpectedly jumpstarts Ronald with 10,000 volts of electricity and blows him across the laboratory like a rocket. The resurrected Ronald is now dubbed Ronnie Rocket. Deborah and the doctor show Ronnie around Deborah's apartment and more or less adopt him as their child. Since he is still learning how to speak and use his new body, his behavior is very childlike, and he seems to be experiencing everything for the first time. His new parents decide to get him an education, so they teach him the alphabet and enroll him in high school. In the deep city, the detective tracks down Terry and follows him to Mr. Fry's apartment, located above a 50s-style diner. Inside the diner is a character known as the Donut Man, who sits eating a large plate of jelly donuts with a wide smile on his face that causes his eyes to bug out. Mr. Fry isn't home, so the detective forces Terry to take him to Bill's house. He tries to force Bill at gunpoint to take him to Mr. Fry, but Bill somehow uses his television set to hypnotize the detective and steal his gun. That night, being held hostage, the detective meets Bill's wife, who tries to seduce him, until they are both discovered by Bill, who flies into a rage and tortures the detective by pressing the heel of his shoe down on all of the detective's fingernails. His anger failing to subside, Bill decides to take him to see Hank Bartels, or Mr. Magic, the most powerful and dangerous man in the entire city. They find him in another diner, even deeper in the city, and we discover that Mr. Magic possesses certain mystical powers. He is able to spontaneously start fires, teleport himself and others, and change his form. While talking to the detective and tormenting him with his powers, he changes from Mr. Magic to the donut man we saw in the other diner, to Hank Bartels, then back to Mr. Magic. Mr. Magic ultimately teleports the detective, along with Terry, to punish him for revealing the location of Bill's hideout, into the inner city, the deepest, darkest, most dangerous area of the entire city. Ronnie is doing poorly in high school. He doesn't fit in, he doesn't seem to be able to comprehend the things that are happening around him, and his body, which now runs on electricity, has been fitted with a large device on his chest that must be plugged into an outlet every 15 minutes to recharge him. Between classes, he wanders into a basement looking for an outlet to recharge himself, and there he discovers a rock and roll band setting up for a rehearsal. He plugs himself in where they have their instruments set up, and when they begin to play, he has an intense reaction to the music. He begins screaming and vibrating in an oddly beautiful way that complements their sound. The band hears this and plays an impromptu show with Ronnie. He dances and screams and makes his own strange sounds that enhances their performance and attracts a small crowd who are spellbound by Ronnie. The band's manager, Mr. Bucko, a sleazy, cigar-chewing business type, sees the effect Ronnie has on the audience and immediately hires him as the band's new frontman. When Dan and Bob find out, they are initially resistant to the idea, but are seduced by Mr. Bucko's promises of fame and fortune. They enter a contest to win a record contract, and Ronnie's performance is so intense, the surge of electricity through his body is so powerful, he ends up seriously injuring himself. Before Dan and Bob can get to him, Mr. Bucko has his own doctor attempt to treat Ronnie. This doctor recognizes both Dan and Bob, as well as their handiwork. Horrified, he threatens to turn them in to the authorities. Dan and Bob try to clumsily subdue the doctor and flee with Ronnie, but are stopped by Mr. Bucko. The band won the contest and the record deal, and he isn't about to let them back out of their contract. Mr. Bucko and his partner, Mr. Green, blackmail Dan and Bob, promising not to turn them in as long as they keep Ronnie functioning and performing. The band heads into the studio to record their first single, which is difficult for Ronnie. His performances are beginning to take a heavier and heavier toll on him physically. When the record is finally finished and released, it becomes an instant smash hit. Ronnie and the band are catapulted into superstardom. The detective and Terry are hopelessly lost in the sinister inner city. Terry warns the detective that they must get off the streets. The inhabitants of the inner city are dangerous and unstable. Their faces are seen to be covered with warts for some unknown reason. They take refuge in the home of a relatively non-threatening woman. She agrees to let them stay as long as they do not bother her daughter, who is having a party in the basement. While sitting at her kitchen table, Terry and the woman fall asleep. The detective is drawn to the basement by some strange sounds. He begins walking down the stairs and discovers a dead body, as well as a couple slow dancing in the corner. Without being noticed, he makes his way back upstairs, only to discover that the woman has awakened in a wild fit and is cutting Terry's neck open with a knife. The detective flees back down the stairs, and this time the couple sees him and rushes towards him. Their mouths are covered in blood. He narrowly escapes out a window, and as he is running down the street, he passes through an area of complete darkness. When he emerges, not only does he discover that he has somehow escaped the inner city and is now back at the diner where he first tried to find Mr. Fry, his appearance has morphed again. He has changed back into the man we saw in the hotel lobby, whom we now find out is Mr. Fry. Mr. Fry runs up to his apartment above the diner and begins searching for something. After a few moments, he seems to find it. The piece of paper with the symbols that Ronald drew. Some sort of internal struggle or battle then appears to take place. Mr. Fry turns back into the detective, then back to Mr. Fry. Over and over, the detective is struggling to regain control over himself. Finally, he triumphs. Rushing downstairs into the diner, he discovers Mr. Magic, once more in the form of the Donut Man. He pulls his pistol and fires. As the bullet travels over towards the Donut Man, it begins slowing down. And as it slows, it begins to morph. By the time it reaches the Donut Man, it has gone completely stationary and is now a jelly donut, which he gently plucks out of the air and begins to eat. When he gets to the last bite, he flicks it back at the detective, and as it travels back to him, it morphs back into a bullet and hits him directly in the forehead. The detective's forehead begins bleeding profusely, and he suddenly finds himself falling through darkness before landing in a small room with transparent walls. Through each of the walls, he can see different scenes, all of them taking place back in the woman's kitchen inside the inner city. He sees Terry bleeding to death on the floor. He blinks, and suddenly the kitchen is empty. He turns to another wall and sees Terry and himself first entering the kitchen. He blinks again and sees the woman and Mr. Fry violently stabbing him to death. In the background, looking in through one of the windows, is the smiling woman, still smiling. He blinks again and he sees Terry and the woman asleep at the table, and himself about to go down into the basement. He pushes through this wall and merges with himself in this moment of time. He turns and sees the woman wake up in her murderous fit. He runs out of the house and is again fleeing down the street, his forehead still bleeding from where Mr. Magic shot him with the donut. He stumbles upon another house, and inside is a sweet elderly couple who invite him in, feed him candies, and sing him songs. Through the window, he sees the smiling woman. They stare at each other. As he stares, her head begins to get bigger and bigger. Soon it is superimposed over an entire wall of the house, staring down at him, smiling. The detective's body begins to stretch and elongate until he is the length of the entire room. The lights begin to flash, the house begins to shake. We hear the sound of rushing wind when the center of the detective's distorted form explodes, and tumbling out comes Mr. Fry. Now the detective is back on the street chasing Mr. Fry. He follows him to a warehouse and confronts him inside, his pistol drawn. Mr. Fry begs for his life and claims to be a part of the detective before he is shot and killed. Once he is dead, out of nowhere appears Mr. Magic. Ronnie is preparing for a big show with his band. They show him a device they've made that is going to give him even more electricity on stage. Ronnie is finding it more and more difficult to perform, and he is frightened by the band's new device. Deborah, Dan, and Bob can't bear to see the suffering Ronnie is being put through, and so begin formulating a plan to escape. Ronnie is forced out on stage and performs the show with the band, as well as his new supporting act, Electra Cute, a young girl who sings and tap dances while periodically receiving charges of electricity from Ronnie. During the show, the band uses their new device, and Ronnie puts on a wild and explosive performance that nearly kills him. Dan and Bob rush him backstage and attempt to repair him. They tell Mr. Bucko he needs to take a break to recover before he can play any more concerts. But Mr. Bucko wants him back on stage tonight and will not take no for an answer. So, Dan and Bob spring their trap and knock out Mr. Bucko, escaping into the night with Ronnie and Deborah. They take Ronnie back to their lab and do what they can to fix his malfunctioning body, but it's not long before an enraged Mr. Bucko has come to and tracked them down. He and Mr. Green break into the lab where Mr. Bucko gives the order to kill them all. Mr. Green pulls a gun, and Deborah, Dan, and Bob are all shot and killed. Mr. Green and Mr. Bucko leave with Ronnie and continue forcing him on stage, but Ronnie doesn't have much left in him. His performances are getting poorer and poorer. His body is getting weaker and weaker. Mr. Bucko finally decides to let Ronnie rest for a few days, but it's not long before he books the band's biggest show yet, and he wants this to be Ronnie's greatest performance, even if it ends up being his last. The date of the show arrives and Ronnie finds himself back on stage with the band starting to turn up the juice, but this might end up being more than he can take. The detective faces down Mr. Magic in the warehouse. Behind him, the face of the smiling woman appears, 15 feet high. The detective is entranced by her. He begins to float up towards her, but Mr. Magic grabs his legs in an attempt to stop him, but his body continues floating up. His legs stretch as Mr. Magic tries to pull him back. He stretches the detective's legs all the way back to his diner. He gives each leg to a henchman to hold on to while he goes back outside to check on the detective. The detective is high in the sky, still floating up higher and higher. The smiling woman's face now fills the sky over the horizon. The detective's legs continue stretching as he floats to her. Mr. Magic begins firing lightning bolts at his body, but they don't have any effect. Ronnie is still on stage, screaming and vibrating. The band and Mr. Bucko keep turning up the power higher and higher, pushing him to the absolute limit. Mr. Magic shoots more lightning bolts at the detective, but they do nothing to stop him. He's getting angrier by the second. He goes back into his diner and opens a kind of golden portal over one of the tables. He thrusts down into it, and this causes the detective, Ronnie, and somehow the city itself to all simultaneously scream out in pain. All of them are connected. Despite this assault, the detective continues his ascent. The smiling woman's head hangs in space, the size of a planet, and still he floats up to her. Mr. Bucko turns the band's device up to full blast, and Ronnie nearly bursts apart at the seams. Electrocute is doing her tap dances and goes over to Ronnie to get a charge, but the power blows her across the stage and turns her into a smoking cinder. Ronnie is bleeding and screaming and beating his head on the stage. These are his final moments. Mr. Magic has turned into the Donut Man. He reaches deeper into his golden portal, and the detective, Ronnie, and the city scream out again, but it's to no avail. The detective finally reaches the smiling woman. Her head transforms into the symbols Ronald drew in the first scene. The detective floats through them, and as he does so, Mr. Magic's henchmen can no longer hold on to his feet. They let go, and the feet follow his body up into the sky and through the symbols. He has escaped the city. Defeated, Mr. Magic screams in a deafening rage before he shrinks and dissipates. Ronnie floats up off his stage and turns golden. The detective floats through a golden temple. The entire city turns to gold. The final page of the script reads thusly: Ronnie floats gold in a blue-black space sky. The detective merges with Ronnie. The smiling woman merges with Ronnie. The golden city is golden inside Ronnie. Ronnie moves his hands, and Bob and Dan and Deborah as little angels float around him. Ronnie sings a beautiful cosmic love song, and all goes to gold. The end. That about does it for this first part of our look at Ronnie Rocket. Next time we're going to go through the second draft of the script, and then we'll take a look at the film's decades-long production history. This has been Unmade Masterpieces with DisRegarding Henry. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Please don't forget to subscribe. You can like the video or leave a comment. I'm sure the interpretations of and reactions to this story are going to be extremely varied, as they always are with David Lynch. And it'd be great if you could share yours. Be sure to stay tuned for the next episodes, and of course, thank you for watching.